Welcome, dear friend, to another quiet journey into the past. Tonight, we will travel back nearly 2,500 years to meet a man who has been called both the father of history and the father of lies. Whether you are resting after a long day or lying awake beneath the calm silence of night, thank you for letting me keep you company. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Is it early morning with the first light breaking across the sky? Or is it late evening when shadows grow long and the world grows still? If the thought of gentle stories from long ago brings you peace, I'd be so grateful if you subscribed. Together, we can walk through many more forgotten paths of history. This is not myth or legend, though sometimes it may sound like it. This is the real story of Herodotus, the wanderer from Halicarnassus, who set out to record the wonders of his world. By the end of this story, you'll discover why his words still echo through time, and how his curiosity shaped the way we understand history itself. But here's what makes his journey truly extraordinary. Herodotus was not just telling tales. He was building the very foundation of history as we know it today. Tonight, we meet a man who lived more than 2,000 years ago, yet his voice still whispers through the pages of history. His name was Herodotus, and he was born in a small coastal city called Halicarnassus in what is now Turkey. He was not a king, not a warrior, not a ruler of empires. He was something rarer. He was a seeker of stories, a collector of truths, and sometimes of mysteries. Imagine him walking the dusty streets of his town, a scroll tucked under his arm, listening intently to sailors, traders, and travelers from distant lands. He was always curious, always hungry to know more. And in that curiosity, he gave us something the world had never truly seen before: history itself. Herodotus was born around 484 BCE, a time when the world was filled with wonders and conflicts alike. The Persian Empire was vast and powerful, stretching across lands so wide it seemed endless. Greece, meanwhile, was divided into city-states, small but fiercely proud of their independence. The stage was set for wars, alliances, betrayals, and victories that would echo through centuries. From an early age, Herodotus was fascinated by these tales of power and struggle. He would hear stories about mighty kings who ruled with cruelty and brave warriors who fought against impossible odds. Yet, unlike others who simply enjoyed the tales, Herodotus wanted to understand why. Why did wars happen? Why did people rise and fall? He believed the world could be explained not by gods alone, but by the choices of men. As a young man, Herodotus began to travel. This was unusual for his time, for most people never left their hometowns. But he felt that to understand the world, he had to see it with his own eyes. He journeyed to Egypt, where he marveled at the pyramids, towering monuments built long before his birth. He walked along the Nile, spoke to priests, and listened to their accounts of gods and kings. He visited Babylon, where massive walls and hanging gardens left him speechless. Everywhere he went, he wrote, recorded, and reflected. Some things he saw himself. Other stories he heard from those who lived them. Sometimes the truth was hard to separate from legend, but Herodotus embraced both, weaving fact and tale into a single narrative. To him, even myths carried a truth about the people who believed them. Herodotus was not simply a traveler, he was a listener. He believed every person carried a fragment of history within them. A soldier might recall the terror of a battlefield. A farmer could tell of droughts and floods that shaped his land. A merchant could describe strange goods from distant lands. Herodotus gathered these fragments carefully, like a mosaic. He was not always certain of the accuracy, and sometimes he admitted openly that a story might not be true, but he recorded it anyway, because even rumors held value in showing how people thought and what they feared. This was new, revolutionary even. For the first time, someone was collecting not just myths or religious tales, but the memories and experiences of ordinary people. And in doing so, Herodotus gave them a kind of immortality. The work of Herodotus would eventually become known as the Histories. It was a vast, sprawling masterpiece, filled with accounts of wars, kings, gods, and nations. At its heart lay the story of the Persian Wars, when Greece and Persia clashed in battles that shaped the destiny of the Western world. Yet the Histories was more than a war chronicle. It was a window into cultures, how Egyptians prepared their dead, how Persians treated their enemies, how Greeks debated democracy. He showed us not just events, but ways of life. Some readers found his work thrilling. Others doubted its truth. That is why he is remembered as both the father of history and the father of lies. But whether fact or embellishment, his stories survived. They became the foundation upon which later historians would build. When Herodotus spoke of the Persian Wars, he did not simply tell of armies clashing and kings commanding. He described the human spirit, the courage and fear that pulsed through ordinary men. He told of the Battle of Marathon, where a small Athenian force faced the mighty Persians and achieved an impossible victory. He painted vivid images of soldiers who stood their ground, of messengers who ran miles to deliver news, of strategies born out of desperation. These were not just battles on paper, they were stories of sacrifice and triumph. To his listeners, it must have felt like standing on the battlefield itself, hearing the clash of bronze shields and the cries of warriors. His words carried the power to transform history into living memory. Yet Herodotus did not shy away from describing defeat. He told of the crushing loss at Thermopylae, where King Leonidas and his small band of Spartans fought bravely against overwhelming Persian numbers. To some, it was a tragedy. To Herodotus, it was a testament to bravery, to men who knew they would die, but chose to resist anyway. He gave us a glimpse of their valor, their discipline, and their unwavering commitment to protect their homeland. Through his words, Thermopylae became more than a battle. It became a legend of courage against impossible odds. Herodotus understood that history was not only about who won or lost, it was also about the spirit with which they fought, the choices they made, and the meaning people gave to their struggles. What made Herodotus unique was his willingness to step beyond Greece. He did not see the Persians as faceless enemies, but as people with their own customs, beliefs, and traditions. He wrote of their kings, their rituals, their ways of life. In his eyes, history was not about glorifying one side. It was about understanding all sides. He described how Persians respected bravery, how they trained their sons to ride horses, shoot arrows, and speak the truth. He even marveled at their tolerance, noting how they often adopted customs from the peoples they conquered. This was rare for his time. Most Greeks saw Persians as barbarians, but Herodotus showed curiosity instead of hatred. In doing so, he gave us one of the earliest glimpses of cross-cultural understanding in recorded history. Herodotus also gave us stories that blended fact with wonder. He wrote of gold-digging ants in distant India, enormous creatures that unearthed treasures from the sands. He described flying snakes, mystical rivers, and lands where the sun shone differently. To modern readers, these tales may sound like fables, But to Herodotus, they reflected the richness of human imagination and the mysteries of the world. Some he likely believed. Others he presented with a gentle caution. This is what they say. He left it to his audience to decide what was real and what was not. In this way, he preserved not just events, but the myths and marvels that colored the lives of ancient people. His work was history, but it was also a mirror of human wonder. Herodotus's travels were not without risk. In a time when roads were dangerous, when borders were guarded with suspicion, and when strangers could be treated with hostility, he dared to wander far. He crossed seas filled with pirates, trekked through deserts where the sun burned relentlessly, and entered cities where his language was not understood. Yet his curiosity drove him forward. Each journey was a thread, and together they formed a tapestry of cultures and events. He was not a soldier, yet he braved dangers that few warriors would face. He was not a ruler, yet he walked among kings and peasants alike, treating their voices with equal importance. For Herodotus, every journey was worth the risk if it brought him closer to the truth of the human story.
Herodotus often reflected on why empires rise and fall. He believed hubris, excessive pride, was often the cause of downfall. Kings who thought themselves greater than the gods, who sought to conquer beyond reason, always met destruction. He told of Xerxes, the Persian king whose vast army crossed into Greece with bridges of boats, a spectacle of unmatched ambition. Yet, despite his overwhelming numbers, Xerxes was humbled by storms, delays, and unexpected resistance. To Herodotus, this was not mere coincidence, it was a reminder that the universe punishes arrogance. His reflections were not just about battles, they were lessons. He was less interested in the tally of soldiers and more in the warnings of history, urging future generations to recognize that human ambition, left unchecked, often leads to ruin. Herodotus's gift was in his storytelling. He did not write history like a cold record of names and dates. He wrote it like a tale told by the fireside, weaving suspense, humor, and curiosity into every account. He shared not only what happened, but how it felt. When describing the Egyptians, he spoke of their daily rituals, their funerals, their strange yet fascinating customs. When describing Scythians, he recounted their nomadic lifestyle, their fierce horsemanship, and their haunting songs. He made faraway peoples feel alive to his Greek readers, sparking both wonder and debate. Many likely disagreed with his interpretations, yet they could not resist his voice. He was the first to prove that history could be more than a record. It could be a story, alive with the colors of humanity. Of all his journeys, his time in Egypt left a particularly deep impression. He was astounded by the Nile River, calling it the lifeblood of the land. He described the pyramids with awe, noting their vast size and the mystery of how they were built. He spoke of mummification rituals, of priests who preserved bodies with reverence, ensuring that the dead would live eternally in the afterlife. To Herodotus, Egypt was a place of endless wonders, older and wiser than Greece itself. He was fascinated by their gods, their strange animal-headed deities, their festivals, and their temples carved in stone. While some of his accounts may have been exaggerated, they captured the sense of amazement that Egypt inspired in travelers of his age. His descriptions would shape how the ancient world remembered Egypt for centuries. But Herodotus was also a man of questions. He admitted openly when he did not know the answer.
He often wrote, "This is what I was told," or "Others say differently." This honesty set him apart. In a time when most writers claimed certainty, Herodotus embraced uncertainty. He understood that truth was not always clear, that people remembered events differently. Rather than dismissing conflicting stories, he recorded them all, allowing readers to weigh them. This approach was groundbreaking. It turned history into an investigation rather than a sermon. By giving voice to multiple perspectives, Herodotus offered something closer to truth than one single version ever could. For this reason, he is remembered not only as the first historian, but also as the first inquirer, a man who knew that truth must be searched for, not assumed. In the Histories, Herodotus also reflected deeply on the nature of power. He described how empires seemed invincible at their height, only to crumble within a generation. He wrote of Croesus, the wealthy king of Lydia, who believed his riches made him secure, only to be defeated and brought low by Persia. To Herodotus, Croesus was a symbol of fortune's fickleness, of how quickly wealth and glory can vanish. His tales were more than history. They were moral lessons, reminding readers that power and prosperity were never permanent. This theme, woven again and again through his work, gave his histories a timeless quality. Even today, his stories speak to us, warning of the dangers of overconfidence and the fragile nature of human success. Herodotus's style also reflected his love for dialogue. He often retold conversations between kings, generals, and philosophers. These dialogues may not have happened exactly as he wrote them, but they revealed the ideas of their time. When Croesus asked the Athenian sage Solon who was the happiest man, Solon replied that no man can be called happy until his life is complete, until fortune has revealed its end. Herodotus used such stories to show that wisdom often lies not in power or wealth, but in perspective. These dialogues made his histories feel alive, as if the voices of the past were still speaking directly to us. He turned history into a stage where human ambition, wisdom, and folly could all be heard. Herodotus also gave us a window into the everyday lives of ancient peoples. He did not only write of kings and wars, he wrote of customs, foods, marriages, festivals, and laws. He told of how Egyptians reversed Greek customs, eating fish raw while Greeks cooked them, or writing right to left instead of left to right. He described Scythians drinking fermented mare's milk, Persians debating important matters twice, once sober, once drunk. These small details may seem trivial, but they revealed the diversity of human life in ways that were unheard of in his age. Herodotus reminded his readers that history was not only about rulers, but about the strange and fascinating habits of everyday peoples. For all his achievements, Herodotus was not universally admired in his own time. Some accused him of embellishing, of caring more for entertainment than truth. The later historian Thucydides dismissed him, insisting that history must be precise and factual. Yet while Thucydides gave us accuracy, Herodotus gave us life. His critics may have mocked him as a teller of tall tales, but his readers were captivated. Even centuries later, Roman writers still debated his credibility while quoting his stories. And today, modern scholars see him as a pioneer who laid the foundation of historical writing, even if not every word he wrote was exact. For in the end, Herodotus was not only a historian, he was a storyteller who knew that truth and meaning often lie in the stories themselves. Herodotus eventually settled in Athens, the beating heart of Greek intellectual life. It was here that he shared his stories aloud, reading sections of the Histories to captivated audiences. Imagine him standing in the agora, scroll unrolled, his voice carrying across the marketplace as citizens leaned in to listen. To the Athenians who had lived through the Persian wars, his tales were both familiar and astonishing, blending memory with perspective. For Herodotus, Athens was not only a home, but a stage, a place where his words found eager ears. In this city of philosophers, dramatists, and thinkers, he found recognition, even as debates about his truthfulness continued. But what mattered most was that people listened, and in their listening, history was born as a shared experience. As his reputation grew, Herodotus's influence spread far beyond Greece. His writings were copied, carried, and studied across the Mediterranean world. Students, philosophers, and rulers alike found wisdom in his tales. For some, he was a teacher of history, for others, a source of entertainment, and for many, he was both. Even as centuries passed, his words endured, surviving wars, fires, and the fall of empires. His curiosity became immortal, his observations a bridge between ages. Today we still turn his pages and hear his voice, steady and thoughtful, inviting us to see the world through his eyes. In his stories, the ancient world still breathes, reminding us that history is not dead, it is alive, carried forward by those who choose to remember.
Herodotus's travels carried him into the heart of Egypt, where he marveled at a civilization that seemed as old as the earth itself. He walked along the Nile and watched its waters rise and fall, listening to priests who explained the river's mysteries. He saw temples carved with hieroglyphs that told stories thousands of years older than Greece itself. To Herodotus, Egypt was a land of marvels, its pyramids, its customs, its gods, unlike any he had known before. He recorded not only what he saw, but also what others believed. Tales of crocodiles worshipped as sacred, cats honored as guardians, and the strange practice of embalming the dead. Whether true or not, these details painted a vivid picture of a world that fascinated him, a place where time itself seemed endless. But Herodotus was not content to merely observe. He asked questions, always probing, always skeptical. When he heard that the Nile's flooding was caused by melting snow, he doubted it, for how could snow exist in such a hot land? Instead, he offered his own theories, sometimes wrong, sometimes brilliant. This restless curiosity set him apart. He was not a passive recorder, but an active thinker, challenging stories rather than swallowing them whole. It was this habit of questioning that made his work so radical for its time. In a world dominated by myth, Herodotus demanded reasons. His willingness to admit uncertainty, saying often, "This is what I was told, though I do not believe it all," reveals a mind struggling to balance wonder with reason. Among his most famous descriptions are those of the Persian Empire, the greatest power of his age. To Herodotus, Persia was both magnificent and terrifying. A land of kings who ruled vast armies and stretched their dominion across continents. He admired their organization, their road networks, their ability to govern so many peoples at once, but he also feared their ambition, for it had brought them into direct conflict with Greece. His tales of Persian customs, like teaching boys only 3 things, to ride, to shoot the bow, and to speak the truth, captured both respect and suspicion. The Persians were not villains in his eyes. They were human, complex, and formidable. By writing of them so carefully, Herodotus preserved a nuanced view, showing us that even enemies deserved to be understood, not just condemned. And then came the stories of war, the great clash between East and West, the Persian invasions of Greece. Herodotus poured energy into recounting the battles of Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea. These were not just wars of armies, but of values, freedom versus tyranny, small city-states against a mighty empire. Yet he never forgot the individuals within them. The courage of Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, the cunning of Themistocles, the pride of Xerxes. He told their stories with drama and detail, blending fact with a sense of theater. In his pages, history became almost like epic poetry, but with a grounding in real events. His readers felt they were standing on the battlefield, hearing the clash of shields, the cries of soldiers, and the roar of destiny. What makes Herodotus so remarkable is how human his history feels. He was not only interested in kings or generals, but in everyday customs, the way Egyptians buried their dead, how Scythians rode their horses, how Persians feasted. He described rituals, festivals, and superstitions with the same care as battles. This gave his work a richness no one before him had attempted. It was not simply a record of war, but a tapestry of human life, a recognition that history is lived by all, not just by rulers. By weaving in these details, Herodotus created a vision of the ancient world that feels alive, filled with voices, colors, and textures that remind us that people long ago laughed, loved, and feared just as we do. Yet his approach also brought criticism. Later thinkers like Thucydides accused him of being too fanciful, too willing to include hearsay. Herodotus, they said, cared more for a good story than for strict accuracy. And in some ways this was true. He included tales of gold-digging ants in India, flying snakes in Arabia, and distant lands where the sun never set. Were these real? Probably not. But by writing them down, Herodotus preserved the imagination of ancient people, their sense of wonder at a mysterious world. His histories are a window not only into what happened, but into what people believed might happen, or what they feared might exist beyond the horizon. Despite criticism, Herodotus's work survived, copied and passed down through centuries. His willingness to listen, record, and compare created the foundation of history as a discipline. Without him, much of what we know about the ancient world would be lost. He gave us the texture of life in a time when most voices vanished into silence. He showed us that history is not only about victories and losses, but about the meaning of those struggles. His readers felt his warmth, his curiosity, his humanity. That is why even today, scholars return to his pages not only to check facts, but to feel the pulse of an age gone by. He made history more than memory. He made it a story worth telling. Imagine him, a man traveling alone across strange lands, carrying only questions and scrolls, seeking truth in a world full of uncertainty. His courage was not on the battlefield, but in his relentless pursuit of knowledge. Every city he entered, every market he explored, every elder he spoke with, added another thread to the fabric of his histories. He was not driven by power or wealth, but by curiosity, an endless hunger to know. That hunger is what makes him feel so modern, so close to us after 2,500 years.
Herodotus reminds us that history is not just about the past, it is about understanding the human spirit in all its wonder, folly, and greatness. Herodotus also teaches us about perspective. He was a Greek, but he looked outward, always trying to see through the eyes of others. He tried to understand Persians, Egyptians, and Scythians on their own terms, not merely as enemies. This made his writing revolutionary for its time. It showed empathy in a time when most saw only divisions. He believed that every people had wisdom, that every custom carried meaning. By preserving these perspectives, he gave future generations not just knowledge of events, but respect for diversity. His lesson is simple, yet profound. To understand history, we must listen to many voices, not just our own. As night deepens and we reflect on Herodotus's journey, we see not only a historian, but a bridge, connecting worlds, cultures, and centuries. His work flows like a river, carrying stories from the past into the present so that they will not be forgotten. He lived in an age of warriors and kings, yet chose a different kind of legacy, words. And those words still speak, softer than swords, but far more enduring. Herodotus showed us that history is not only about victories and losses, but about the meaning of those struggles. His readers felt his warmth, his curiosity, his humanity. That is why even today, scholars return to his pages not only to check facts, but to feel the pulse of an age gone by. He made history more than memory. He made it a story worth telling.